I pulled into my sister Margaret's driveway that Thanksgiving evening. My 10-year-old Honda Civic, looking shabby next to the Mercedes and BMW parked there. Walking through the front door in my usual jeans and flannel shirt, I could smell the turkey and hear laughter from the dining room. When I approached the beautifully set table where everyone was gathering, my 20-year-old niece Brooklyn wrinkled her nose and announced loudly, "Uncle Josh, we don't sit with your kind at the grown-up table." The entire family erupted in laughter. My brother-in-law Derek chimed in about keeping the riffraff separate, while Margaret just shrugged apologetically. My face burned as they pointed me toward the kids' table in the kitchen. What none of them realized was that I owned every single property they were living in. Sitting at that cramped folding table in the kitchen, surrounded by confused children asking why I was there, my mind drifted back to how this family dynamic had developed over the past 3 decades. I wasn't born into this family like the others. When I was 7 years old, my parents died in a car accident on Interstate 95 during a winter storm. My Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank took me in, giving me a roof over my head when I had nowhere else to go. But from day one, I was always the outsider. While my cousins Margaret and Tyler got new clothes for school, I wore hand-me-downs from Goodwill. When they received Christmas presents wrapped in shiny paper, I got practical items like socks and notebooks. Margaret got a car for her 16th birthday, while I learned to take the city bus everywhere. The message was clear. I was charity, not family. Margaret married Derek Williams when she was 25, and he came from money. Real money. His family owned a chain of furniture stores across 3 states, and Derek himself had an MBA from a prestigious business school. After their wedding, Margaret gradually distanced herself from anyone she considered beneath her new status. That included me. Brooklyn grew up hearing whispered conversations about poor Uncle Josh, and learned early that looking down on me was acceptable family behavior. She absorbed the lessons that money determined worth, that success was measured by your car and clothes, that some people simply belonged in different social categories. What they never knew was that while they were judging my appearance and income, I had been quietly building something extraordinary. 8 years ago, I started with one foreclosed property in a rough neighborhood downtown. I bought it for $12,000 cash, money I had saved working double shifts in construction and living in a studio apartment that cost $400 a month. I spent 6 months fixing that house myself, learning plumbing and electrical work through YouTube videos and library books. When I sold it 9 months later for $38,000, I had my blueprint. I reinvested every penny, bought 2 more foreclosures, and repeated the process. But I learned something crucial during those early years. I discovered that the real money wasn't in flipping houses. It was in holding them, renting them out, building a portfolio that generated passive income month after month. So I shifted strategies. Within 3 years, I owned 15 rental properties. Within 5 years, I had expanded into small apartment complexes. By year 7, I was purchasing commercial buildings and luxury developments. My company, Meridian Holdings LLC, now owned a real estate portfolio worth $12.3 million. I had learned to structure everything through limited liability companies and trusts, keeping my personal name off public records. To the outside world, Josh Martinez was still the guy who drove an old Honda and wore clothes from discount stores. But behind the scenes, I controlled enough property to house 5,000 people across the metropolitan area. The beautiful irony that was becoming clear to me as I sat at that kids' table was slowly revealing itself. Margaret's husband Derek worked as a property manager for several large real estate companies in the city. I had been watching his LinkedIn profile for months, tracking his career moves. What Derek didn't know was that one of his biggest clients was Meridian Holdings. He had been working for me for the past 2 years without realizing it. The construction projects he managed, the tenant complaints he handled, the maintenance schedules he coordinated, all of it was generating profits that flowed directly into my accounts. Derek had been making me money while simultaneously treating me like garbage at family gatherings. As I picked at the leftover mac and cheese someone had scraped onto a paper plate for me, I realized this Thanksgiving might be the perfect opportunity to reveal some truths that had been hidden for far too long. From my position at the kids' table, I had a perfect view into the dining room where the adults were having animated conversations over their perfectly plated turkey dinner. I pulled out my phone and opened the property management app that connected me to all my buildings, checking the day's reports while listening to their chatter. Derek was in full bragging mode, describing his latest project to the table. "You know, I manage some really high-end properties for this mysterious investor," he said, cutting into his turkey with obvious satisfaction. "The guy owns some of the nicest buildings in the downtown corridor, but nobody knows who he is. Works through shell companies and trusts. Smart money, if you ask me." Margaret nodded approvingly. "Derek has such important responsibilities. Managing million-dollar properties takes real expertise." That's when Derek dropped the bombshell that made my blood pressure spike. "Actually, I just helped my buddy Tyler get a sweet deal on a downtown loft. The building owner never has to know I gave him a little discount on the rent. What he doesn't know won't hurt him, right?" I nearly choked on my soda. Tyler was Margaret's younger brother, my other cousin who had called me trailer trash at Christmas 3 years ago when I showed up in my work boots because I had come straight from a construction job. I discreetly opened my property management system and searched for Tyler's name. There it was, Tyler Martinez, Unit 12A, Meridian Tower, my newest and most expensive building. According to the lease agreement, he was supposed to be paying $2,800 per month for his one-bedroom luxury apartment, but looking at the payment history, Derek had been charging him only $2,200, pocketing the difference or simply not collecting it. $600 per month in lost revenue for 14 months. Derek had cost me $8,400 just on Tyler's apartment alone. But that wasn't the worst part. As I dug deeper into the app, I discovered that Derek had been giving unauthorized discounts to several other tenants across multiple buildings. Some were friends of his. Others were people he was trying to impress at business networking events. In every case, Derek was playing generous landlord with my money. The conversation at the adult table had moved on to discussing Brooklyn's college experience. She was a sophomore at State University, majoring in communications and minoring in expensive habits. From what I could tell based on her social media posts, Brooklyn just loves her dorm. Margaret gushed. "It's one of the newer buildings on campus. So much nicer than where I lived when I was in college." Brooklyn nodded enthusiastically. "Westfield Hall is totally the best housing on campus. It's like living in a luxury hotel. My suite has granite countertops and a walk-in closet bigger than most apartments." Something about that name tugged at my memory. Westfield Hall. I opened another app on my phone, this one connected to my commercial real estate holdings. 6 months ago, I had purchased a portfolio of properties from a distressed university foundation that was facing budget cuts. The deal included several student housing complexes that I had acquired through a subsidiary company. There it was, Westfield Hall, State University campus, purchased for $4.2 million, managed through my holding company, University Campus Partners LLC. Brooklyn was living in a building I owned, complaining about her poor Uncle Josh while I was the one providing her luxury housing. But the biggest shock was yet to come. As the family conversation continued, I heard Uncle Frank's voice from the far end of the table. Frank was the man who had taken me in after my parents died, and despite the family's general attitude toward me, he had always been kind. Now, in his late 70s, Frank lived alone in the same house where he had raised me. "I don't mean to bring down the mood," Frank said quietly, "but I might not be able to host Christmas this year. The property taxes on the house have gotten so high, and with my fixed income." He trailed off, clearly embarrassed. Margaret's mother-in-law, a sharp-tongued woman named Patricia, patted Frank's hand condescendingly. "Oh, Frank, I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do." But I could see the stress in Frank's weathered face. This was a man who had worked 43 years as a mechanic, saved every penny he could, and was now facing the possibility of losing his home because he couldn't afford tax increases in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. That's when Brooklyn decided to make another cutting remark that pushed me over the edge. "Uncle Josh probably doesn't have to worry about property taxes." She laughed, taking a selfie with her expensive phone. "I mean, he probably lives in some tiny apartment somewhere. Maybe even rents a room from someone." She held up her phone, showing off a video of her dorm room. "This is my suite at Westfield. Isn't it amazing? I'm so lucky to live somewhere this nice while I'm getting my education." I stared at that video, watching her pan across granite countertops and hardwood floors that I had paid to install in a building that I owned, while she mocked me for being poor. The irony was so thick I could taste it, but there was something else building in my chest. Anger, yes, but also a sense of clarity. These people had spent years treating me like I was worthless, and now I had the power to show them exactly how wrong they had been. I excused myself from the kids' table, telling the children I needed to use the bathroom. But instead of heading to the guest bathroom downstairs, I walked quietly up the carpeted staircase to the second floor of Margaret and Derek's house. I had been here enough times over the years to know the layout perfectly. Their home office was at the end of the hallway, a spacious room with built-in bookshelves and an expensive mahogany desk that Derek liked to show off. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see the glow of computer screens from inside. I slipped into the room and found Derek's laptop open on the desk, multiple spreadsheets displayed across 2 monitors. What I saw made my stomach drop and my hands clench into fists. The first spreadsheet was labeled Meridian Holdings, Monthly Reports. It contained detailed financial information about 6 of my buildings, including rental income, maintenance expenses, and profit margins. But the numbers were wrong. Significantly wrong. According to Derek's reports to my management company, Meridian Tower had generated $68,000 in rental income last month, but my own record showed it should have been $74,000. $6,000 just missing. I quickly took photos of the screen with my phone, then clicked through to other spreadsheets. The pattern was consistent across all my properties that Derek managed. Maintenance costs were inflated, rental income was understated, and fees were being charged for work that had never been performed. One spreadsheet showed invoices for emergency roof repairs at Riverside Commons, one of my apartment complexes, for $12,000. But I remembered that building clearly. The roof had been replaced just 2 years ago and was still under warranty. There had never been any emergency repairs. As I dug deeper into Derek's files, taking photographs of everything, the scope of his theft became clear. Over the past 2 years, Derek had systematically embezzled approximately $43,000 from my properties. He had been using his position as property manager to create fake expenses, skim rental payments, and redirect maintenance funds into personal accounts. But then, I found something that made my blood run cold. In a folder labeled Future Acquisitions, Derek had been researching Meridian Holdings itself, trying to identify the mysterious owner behind the LLC. He had compiled property records, analyzed purchasing patterns, and even hired a private investigator to trace the company's ownership structure. The most recent document in the folder was a business proposal. Derek was planning to approach the owner of Meridian Holdings with an offer to purchase the entire portfolio at 70% of market value. His plan was to leverage his inside knowledge as property manager to convince the owner that the buildings were underperforming and worth less than their actual value. Derek Williams, the man who had been stealing from me for 2 years, was now plotting to manipulate me into selling my $12 million empire for $8 million, giving him a $4 million profit on the deal. I photographed every page of the proposal, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was elaborate, premeditated fraud on a massive scale. The proposal included detailed financial projections, showing how Derek planned to increase profits once he owned the buildings himself. He would raise rents, cut maintenance expenses, and eliminate unnecessary amenities to maximize cash flow. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together, Derek announced with the kind of pompous authority that wealthy people use when they want to emphasize their importance. The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to him. Family is about loyalty, Derek continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. It's about understanding where you belong and staying true to the people who matter. It's about supporting each other through thick and thin, but also about recognizing the natural order of relationships. Margaret beamed at her husband, clearly proud of his eloquence. So, heirs to family loyalty, Derek said, raising his glass higher. To knowing your place in life and staying true to your station. Margaret stood up and raised her own glass. And to appreciating the people who work hard to provide for their families and create opportunities for the next generation. Then Brooklyn, my 20-year-old niece who had never worked a day in her life, stood up with her glass of wine, and delivered the final insult that shattered my last remaining restraint. "And to keeping certain people where they belong," she said with a smirk, looking directly at me, sitting at the kids' table in the kitchen. "Because some people just aren't meant for the grown-up table." The entire dining room erupted in laughter. Uncle Frank looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Tyler chuckled and shook his head like Brooklyn had made some clever joke. Even Margaret's mother-in-law, Patricia, smiled approvingly. I sat there in the kitchen, surrounded by puzzled children who didn't understand why the adults were being so mean, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. These people had humiliated me for the last time. They had stolen from me, mocked me, and dismissed me while living off the wealth I had created. It was time for them to learn exactly who they had been laughing at all these years. I finished my dinner slowly, chewing each bite deliberately while the family continued their celebration in the dining room. The children at my table had grown restless and wandered off to play video games in the basement, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my phone. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a familiar number. David Chen, my attorney who handled all the legal matters for Meridian Holdings. David worked for a prestigious law firm downtown and had been helping me structure my business ventures for the past 5 years. I pressed dial and waited for him to answer. "Josh, what's going on? I thought you were having dinner with family." "David, I need you to prepare some documents for me. Emergency basis. Can you handle this tonight?" "Of course. What do you need?" I spoke clearly, making sure my voice would carry into the dining room where the family was finishing their dessert. "I need you to prepare eviction notices for 3 specific properties. Tyler Martinez, at Meridian Tower, Unit 12, A. Brooklyn Martinez, at Westfield Hall, Suite 2, 19. And I want a 60-day notice prepared for Derek and Margaret Williams at their current residence." The dining room conversation stopped abruptly. I could feel their attention turning toward the kitchen. "Also, David, I need you to prepare a criminal complaint for embezzlement against Derek Williams. I have photographic evidence of financial fraud totaling approximately $43,000. I'll email you the documentation tonight." Derek's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up quickly. I could hear his footsteps approaching the kitchen. "One more thing." I continued into the phone. "Call Johnson Property Management first thing Monday morning. This is Josh Martinez, owner of Meridian Holdings, LLC. I'm terminating Derek Williams immediately for cause. Security should escort him from the premises and revoke all his access credentials. Josh." David's voice was professional but concerned. "This sounds serious. Are you sure you want to move this quickly? I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide. Margaret was right behind him, looking confused and frightened. "Josh," Derek said, his voice tight with tension, "what exactly do you think you're doing?" I ended the call with David and looked up at Derek calmly. "I'm handling some business matters that have been neglected for too long." Margaret stepped forward, forcing a nervous laugh. "Josh, what are you talking about? You're scaring us with all this talk about evictions and property management." "Margaret," I said, standing up from the kids' table for the first time all evening, "when was the last time you asked me what I do for work?" She blinked rapidly, caught off guard by the question. Well, you work construction, don't you?" "I haven't worked construction in 8 years. Tyler had wandered into the kitchen now, drawn by the tension in the room. Brooklyn appeared behind him, her phone in her hand as always, probably ready to record whatever drama was unfolding. "Then, what do you do?" Margaret asked. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The screen displayed my primary checking account balance, $8,743,216.18. I held the phone out so Margaret could see the screen clearly. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at my face, then back at the screen. "Josh, this has to be fake. This is some kind of joke." I swiped to another screen, showing my investment account, $3,900,000 in stocks and bonds. "Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together." He looked at Derek with confusion and growing anger. "Brooklyn," I continued, scrolling to another property deed. "Westfield Hall. The luxury dorm you love so much?" I bought it 6 months ago from the University Foundation. That granite countertop you're always showing off on social media? I paid for it. Brooklyn's phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the kitchen floor. And Derek, I said, looking directly into his eyes, I have photographs of every spreadsheet on your computer upstairs. 2 years of embezzlement, fake maintenance invoices, skimmed rental payments, a business plan to defraud me out of $4 million. Derek opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Margaret was still staring at my phone screen. Josh, I don't understand. If you have all this money, why do you dress like, why do you live like what, Margaret? Like someone you can look down on? Like someone who deserves to sit at the kids' table? The entire family had gathered in the kitchen now. Uncle Frank stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock. Patricia, Margaret's mother-in-law, was clutching her pearls and looking like she might faint. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. That's interesting, I said aloud. That's from the automated property management system. Tyler, you just got a rent adjustment notice. Your lease agreement includes a clause allowing for immediate rent increases when unauthorized discounts are discovered. Your new monthly rent is $3,100, effective immediately. Tyler went white. Josh, I didn't know Derek was giving me a discount. I thought that was the regular price. I know you didn't, Tyler, but you did know it was perfectly fine to call me trailer trash while you were living in my building. Brooklyn started crying. Uncle Josh, I don't understand what's happening. What's happening, Brooklyn, is that actions have consequences. For years, this family has treated me like I'm worthless. You've mocked me, excluded me, and made me feel like I don't belong, all while I've been quietly building an empire that provides housing for half the people in this room. I looked around at their shocked faces, feeling a sense of satisfaction that I had been waiting 8 years to experience. But here's the thing, I continued. I'm not a cruel person. Everyone in this room has a choice to make. You can continue treating people like they're beneath you based on appearances and assumptions, or you can learn what it means to show genuine respect and humility. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Brooklyn's number on the caller ID. Brooklyn, why are you calling me? I'm standing right here. I didn't call you, she said, her voice shaking. I looked at my phone more carefully. The call was coming from the University Housing Department. This is Josh Martinez. I answered. Mr. Martinez, this is Sandra Williams from State University Housing. I'm calling about an irregularity we've discovered in our housing management contract with University Campus Partners LLC. We need to schedule an immediate review of one of our residents. I put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. Which resident? I asked. Brooklyn Martinez, Suite 219, Westfield Hall. There appears to be a conflict of interest in her housing arrangement that may violate university policy. Brooklyn's crying intensified. The possibility of losing her housing would affect her entire college experience. I'll call you back tomorrow to discuss the details, I told Sandra, then ended the call. The kitchen was completely silent except for Brooklyn's sniffling. Uncle Frank, I said, turning to the man who had raised me. How much do you owe in property taxes? Frank's voice was barely a whisper. $11,400. But Josh, I don't want you to feel obligated. Frank, you're not losing your house. But everyone else in this room needs to start treating people with respect, or they're going to learn what real loss feels like. The following Monday morning, I was sitting in my real estate office downtown when David called me with an update. Josh, Derek Williams, was arrested this morning. The police took him into custody at his home around 7 a.m. The evidence you provided was more than sufficient for fraud and embezzlement charges. I watched through my office window as the city came to life below me, people hurrying to work in buildings that many of them didn't realize I owned. What about the other matters? Tyler received the eviction notice, but he's been calling my office all morning asking to speak with you. Brooklyn's housing situation is being reviewed by the university, but they're willing to work with us on a resolution. And Margaret called my office crying, asking if there's any way to avoid foreclosure on their house. Foreclosure. Apparently, Derek's arrest triggered a morality clause in their mortgage agreement. The bank is calling their loan due immediately because of his criminal charges. I hadn't anticipated that consequence, but it wasn't entirely surprising. High-end mortgages often included clauses about criminal activity. What does Margaret want to do? She's asking if you would consider helping them. She wants to meet with you to apologize and discuss options. I leaned back in my leather chair, thinking about the scared look in Margaret's eyes when Derek was led away in handcuffs that morning. Their whole world had collapsed in 72 hours. Set up a meeting for this afternoon. And David, prepare paperwork for Tyler. I'm offering him an alternative to eviction. What kind of alternative? Community service. 100 hours at the downtown homeless shelter. If he completes it within 6 months, I'll reduce his rent to $2,400 and let him stay. That's generous, considering everything. Tyler was cruel, but he was following his family's lead. People can change if they're given the right motivation. After I hung up with David, my assistant knocked on my office door. Mr. Martinez? There's a young woman here to see you. She says she's your niece, Brooklyn Martinez. I was surprised. Brooklyn finding my office showed initiative I hadn't expected from someone who spent most of her time taking selfies. Send her in. Brooklyn walked into my office looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual polished appearance was replaced with red eyes, unwashed hair, and clothes that looked like she had slept in them. Uncle Josh, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. She sat down across from my desk and began crying again. I've been thinking about everything I said to you, and I feel sick. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't concentrate on anything. I keep remembering all the times I was mean to you, and I don't understand why I thought that was okay. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance, but her distress appeared genuine. What do you want, Brooklyn? I want to know what I can do to make this right. I know you're probably going to kick me out of school, and I know I deserve it, but I want to do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness. Why does my forgiveness matter to you? She wiped her eyes with a tissue. Because I realized something awful about myself. I've been a terrible person. I've been spoiled and mean and judgmental, and I never even questioned it. I just assumed that because my family had money, that made us better than other people. And now I see how wrong that was. Uncle Josh, you've been working and building something incredible, while I've been living off other people's money and acting like I'm entitled to it. I've never earned anything in my life. I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. Brooklyn's crisis was genuine, but I needed to be sure her motivation for change was equally real. Brooklyn, if I told you right now that I would let you stay in your dorm and everything could go back to the way it was before, would you go back to treating me the same way? She was quiet for a long moment. I hope not, but I don't trust myself yet. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. If you complete the program and write me a letter explaining what you learned, I'll work with the university to resolve your housing situation. Brooklyn stood up and moved toward the door, then stopped. Uncle Josh, can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you ever tell us about your success? Why did you let us treat you badly when you could have stopped at any time? I sat back down at my desk because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I couldn't fight back. I wanted to understand what kind of people my family members actually were when they thought there were no consequences for their behavior. And what did you discover? I discovered that some people are cruel when they think they have power over others. But I also discovered that some people can change when they're forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Brooklyn nodded slowly. I want to be the second kind of person. Then prove it. After Brooklyn left, I called Margaret to set up our meeting for that afternoon. She answered on the first ring. Josh, thank God you called. I've been pacing around this house all morning, trying to figure out how our lives fell apart so quickly. Margaret, meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street at 3 o'clock. Come alone. Should I bring anything? Just an honest explanation of why you think I should help you. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Margaret was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a cup that she wasn't drinking from. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the fear and desperation in her eyes. Josh, she said as I sat down across from her, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I've been terrible to you for years, and I know Derek stole from you, but I have nowhere else to turn. Tell me about your situation. The bank wants us out of the house in 30 days. Derek's assets are frozen because of the criminal charges. I lost my part-time job when his arrest became public. Brooklyn doesn't know yet that we might not be able to pay her tuition next semester. Margaret started crying quietly. Josh, I worked so hard to build this life. I wanted to be successful and respected and comfortable. I thought that meant looking down on people who had less than me. And now I realize that everything I built was based on my husband stealing from you. Our whole lifestyle was funded by crime, and I was too arrogant to see it. I ordered a coffee and waited for her to continue. I need help, Josh. I need a place to live and a way to support my family. But more than that, I need to learn how to be a better person. I've been thinking about Frank and how he struggled alone with his property taxes while I was living in luxury, and am ashamed of the person I've become. What are you asking for? I'm asking for a chance to start over and do better. I'll take any job, live in any apartment you have available, and work to pay you back for what Derek stole. I studied Margaret's face, looking for sincerity. Like Brooklyn, her distress seemed genuine. I have an affordable housing complex in Riverside. 2-bedroom units, $800 per month. The building is clean and safe, but it's not luxury. I'll take it. The rent includes a commitment to coordinate volunteer programs for the complex, community outreach, tenant assistance, organizing educational workshops. You'd be working directly with families who are struggling financially. Margaret nodded eagerly. I want to do that. I want to learn how to help people instead of looking down on them. Margaret, this isn't charity. This is an opportunity to rebuild your life based on service instead of status. If you can't handle living in a modest apartment and working with families who have less money than you used to have, this won't work. I can handle it, Josh. I have to. As I walked back to my office that afternoon, I realized that my plan was working better than I had hoped. The family members who had humiliated me were being forced to confront their behavior and make genuine changes, but there was still one more conversation I needed to have. 3 weeks later, I was sitting across from Tyler in a conference room at the downtown homeless shelter where he had been completing his community service hours. His appearance had changed dramatically since Thanksgiving dinner. His expensive clothes had been replaced with jeans and work boots. His perfectly styled hair was messy from manual labor, and his hands were rough from washing dishes and moving furniture. How many hours have you completed? I asked, reviewing the timesheet his supervisor had given me. 43 hours so far. I'm here Tuesday through Thursday evenings and all day Saturday. What have you been doing? Tyler's voice was different than I remembered. The arrogant tone was gone, replaced with something more humble, mostly kitchen work, helping prepare and serve meals, cleaning up afterward. Sometimes I help with intake when new people arrive. What's that like? He was quiet for a moment, looking down at his hands. It's humbling, Josh, really humbling. Last week I helped a guy named Marcus fill out paperwork to get into transitional housing. He's a veteran who lost his apartment when his disability payments got delayed. The whole time I kept thinking about how I called you trailer trash while living in a luxury apartment that you owned. Tell me more about Marcus. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, came home with PTSD and struggled to hold jobs because of panic attacks. When his disability application got tied up in bureaucracy for 8 months, he couldn't pay rent and got evicted. Has been living in his car for 6 weeks. Tyler looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. Josh, Marcus worked harder in 1 day of military service than I've worked in my entire life. And he's homeless while I was complaining about my rent being too low. What else have you learned? I've learned that most of the people here aren't homeless because they're lazy or made bad choices. They're here because of medical bills, or job losses, or family emergencies, or mental health crises. They're here because our society doesn't have enough safety nets for people who are struggling. Tyler's supervisor, a woman named Carol, knocked on the conference room door. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but Tyler, Marcus wanted to thank you for helping him get connected with the Veterans Housing Program. He got approved for an apartment today. Tyler's face lit up with genuine happiness. That's incredible. Tell him congratulations. After Carol left, I studied Tyler's expression. The transformation seemed real. Tyler, I'm prepared to offer you a permanent rent reduction to $2,400 per month. But I have a condition. What kind of condition? I want you to spend 10 hours per month volunteering here for the next 2 years, and I want you to help me expand my affordable housing programs to include housing specifically for veterans. You want me to work for you. I want you to work with me. You're studying business, and you're learning about the reality of housing insecurity. I could use someone who understands both sides of the equation. Tyler sat back in his chair, clearly surprised. Josh, after everything I said about you, why would you trust me with something that important? Because the Tyler who called me trailer trash wouldn't have spent 43 hours washing dishes and helping homeless veterans. People can change. Tyler, you're proving it. I want to do this. I want to help. Then we'll start with Marcus. I'm purchasing a small apartment building next month, specifically for transitional housing for veterans. You can help me design the program. 2 days later, I met with Margaret at the affordable housing complex where she had been living for 3 weeks. Her 2-bedroom apartment was small but clean, furnished with items from thrift stores and donations. The difference in her lifestyle was dramatic, but she seemed to be adapting. How are you settling in? I asked, sitting on her second-hand couch. It's an adjustment, Margaret admitted, but it's also been eye-opening. My neighbor Rosa works 2 jobs to support 3 kids, and she's one of the kindest, hardest-working people I've ever met. She's been teaching me how to budget groceries and shop for bargains. What about the volunteer coordinator position? Margaret's eyes brightened. That's been the best part. Last week I organized a financial literacy workshop where residents could learn about budgeting and credit repair. 12 families attended, and 3 of them have already started savings accounts. I'm proud of you for that. Josh, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking a lot about Uncle Frank and how we ignored his struggles while we were living in luxury. I went to visit him yesterday. How is he? He's doing well since you took care of his property taxes, but he's lonely. I asked him if he would consider moving into one of the apartments here, and he said yes. We could take care of each other. That surprised me. Frank wants to leave his house. The house is too big for him now, and he wants to be around people. Plus, he has 40 years of experience as a mechanic. Some of the residents here need help with car repairs, and Frank could teach basic auto maintenance classes. That's a wonderful idea. Margaret stood up and walked to her kitchen window, which overlooked the complex courtyard where children were playing. Josh, I want to apologize to you properly, not just for how I treated you at Thanksgiving, but for years of making you feel like you didn't belong in our family. I'm listening. I was so focused on climbing the social ladder that I forgot what actually matters. Family isn't about money or status. It's about supporting each other and treating everyone with dignity. What would you do differently now? Everything. If I could go back, I would have asked about your life instead of making assumptions. I would have celebrated your successes instead of dismissing you. I would have made sure you always felt welcome at our table. Margaret turned back to face me, tears in her eyes. I can't change the past, but I want to spend the rest of my life treating people better. All people. Not just the ones I think are important. Margaret, I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? I'm expanding my affordable housing program to include educational services and community support. I need someone to coordinate programs across multiple properties. It would be a full-time job with benefits and opportunities for advancement. Margaret's mouth fell open. You would hire me. You've proven that you can change, and you understand both sides of the economic spectrum now. Plus, you're good at organizing programs and working with people. Josh, I would love that job. Thank you for giving me a chance to rebuild my life. There's one more thing, I said. Brooklyn completed her volunteer program at the community center. She taught budgeting classes for 6 weeks and wrote me a 12-page letter about what she learned. How did she do? She exceeded every expectation I had. The program director said she was one of the most dedicated volunteers that ever had, and her letter showed real insight into her previous behavior and genuine commitment to changing. Margaret smiled through her tears. She's been so different since Thanksgiving. More thoughtful, more grateful. She even got a part-time job at a coffee shop to start earning her own money. I'm working with the university to resolve her housing situation. She can stay in her dorm, but she's committed to continuing her volunteer work throughout college. What about Derek? Margaret's expression became serious. Hez, serving 6 months in minimum security prison. I've been thinking about whether our marriage can survive this, and I honestly don't know. But I've told him that if we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be based on honesty and integrity. What does he say about that? Has been writing me letters from prison. He says he wants to change, but I need to see sustained evidence over time. Trust has to be earned back. As I left Margaret's apartment that day, I felt a sense of satisfaction that went deeper than simple revenge. 3 family members who had treated me with cruelty and disrespect were now learning to build lives based on service, humility, and genuine care for others. But the final chapter of this story was still to come. 6 months after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner, I stood in Uncle Frank's backyard, watching him flip burgers on the grill, while children from the affordable housing complex played on the swing set I had installed for him. Frank had indeed moved into a small apartment near Margaret, and his house had become a community center where families gathered for barbecues, auto repair workshops, and Frank's famous storytelling sessions. Brooklyn approached me carrying a plate of potato salad that she had made from scratch, another skill she had learned during her transformation. "Uncle Josh," she said, "I have something to give you." She handed me an envelope with my name written in careful handwriting. "What's this?" "It's a thank you letter, but also something else." I opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter on university letterhead, along with a check for $500. "Brooklyn, what is this check for?" "It's my first payment to reimburse you for the housing discount I received without knowing it. I calculated that over the past year, Derek's unauthorized discount cost you about $6,000 on my housing. I'm going to pay you back $50 a month until it's covered." "Brooklyn, you don't need to do that." "Yes, I do. I need to take responsibility for the money I didn't earn and the privilege I didn't appreciate." I read her letter, which detailed her continued volunteer work at the community center and her decision to change her major from communications to social work. "I want to work with families who are facing housing insecurity," she explained. "I want to help people navigate the system and find resources. The kids I've been teaching have shown me what real resilience looks like." Tyler walked over from where he had been helping Frank with the grill. He was wearing a t-shirt from the Veterans Housing Program we had launched together. "Josh, I wanted to update you on the Transitional Housing Project. We've housed 8 veterans in the past 3 months, and 5 of them have found permanent employment. How's Marcus doing?" Tyler's face lit up. "Marcus is doing great. Has been sober for 4 months, has working as a security guard downtown, and he just got approved for permanent housing. He wants to become a volunteer counselor to help other veterans who are struggling." "That's fantastic." Margaret appeared from Frank's kitchen, carrying a tray of corn on the cob. Her transformation was perhaps the most dramatic of all. She had lost weight, gained confidence, and developed a genuine warmth that I had never seen before. "Frank, the corn is ready," she called out, then walked over to me. "Josh, I wanted to let you know that the financial literacy program has expanded to 4 more housing complexes. We've helped 37 families open savings accounts, and 12 families improve their credit scores enough to qualify for better housing. I'm proud of the work you're doing." Margaret smiled. "I'm proud of it too. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm contributing something meaningful to the world." As we gathered around Frank's picnic table for dinner, I looked around at the faces of my family members. Brooklyn was helping serve food to the neighborhood children who had joined us. Tyler was deep in conversation with a veteran about job training programs. Margaret was making sure everyone had everything they needed. These were the same people who had humiliated me 6 months ago, but they were almost unrecognizable now. Frank stood up to make a toast, raising his glass of lemonade. "I want to say something about family," he said, his voice strong despite his 79 years. "Real family isn't about money or status or who sits where at the dinner table. Real family is about lifting each other up when someone falls down, celebrating each other's successes, and treating everyone with respect and dignity." He looked directly at me. "Josh, you showed this family what it means to use success responsibly. You could have destroyed us, but instead you gave us opportunities to grow and become better people." Brooklyn stood up next to Frank. "I want to add something to that toast." She looked around the table with tears in her eyes. "Uncle Josh, you taught me that wealth means nothing without character, and that family means supporting each other through everything. not just when it's convenient. You taught me that real privilege comes with real responsibility. Tyler raised his glass. And you taught me that judging people by their appearance or their circumstances is not just wrong, it's stupid. Some of the wisest, strongest people I've ever met are the ones society has given up on. Margaret stood up last. Josh, you taught me that true success is measured by how many people you help, not how much money you accumulate. You gave us all a chance to rebuild our lives based on service instead of selfishness. As we clinked glasses and began eating Frank's perfectly grilled burgers, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in years. The family that had rejected me had learned to embrace values that actually mattered. But there was one more surprise left in this story. As we finished dinner, a car pulled into Frank's driveway. A woman stepped out, carrying a bouquet of flowers and walking with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. Josh, Frank said with a sly smile, there's someone I want you to meet. The woman approached our table, and I stood up to greet her. Everyone, I said, feeling nervous but excited. I'd like you to meet Sarah Johnson. She's a teacher at the elementary school where Brooklyn has been volunteering. She runs the financial literacy program that Brooklyn has been helping with. Sarah smiled warmly at the group. I've heard so much about all of you. Brooklyn talks about your family transformation constantly. She's incredibly proud of the work everyone is doing. Sarah and I have been spending time together, I explained to the family. She's teaching me as much as I'm learning from our volunteer work. Brooklyn grinned. Uncle Josh, are you telling us you have a girlfriend? I'm telling you that I've met someone who shares my values and makes me want to be an even better person. Frank clapped his hands together. Well, Sarah, you're just in time for dessert. Margaret made her famous apple pie from scratch. As Sarah joined our table and the conversation flowed naturally around plans for expanding the volunteer programs, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all to this moment. 6 months ago, I had been the family outcast, humiliated and dismissed by people who thought my worth was determined by my appearance and bank account balance. Tonight, I was surrounded by family members who had learned that real wealth comes from treating others with dignity, that genuine success is measured by service to community, and that humility and respect are the foundations of meaningful relationships. The lesson I had learned was equally important. True power isn't about revenge or proving superiority. It's about using privilege and resources to create opportunities for others to grow, change, and discover their better selves. As I watched Brooklyn help clear dishes while discussing her plans to transfer to a state university with a better social work program, as I listened to Tyler describe his vision for expanding veterans' housing programs, and as I saw Margaret coordinate plans for next week's community workshop, I realized that this transformation had changed me as much as it had changed them. I had learned that forgiveness, combined with accountability, creates possibilities that revenge alone never could. The family that had once defined me by what I lacked had learned to see value that couldn't be measured in dollars. And I had learned that the greatest satisfaction comes not from accumulating wealth, but from using it to help others write better stories for their own lives. Before we said goodnight, I made an announcement that surprised even me. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together, she said. Watching your family's transformation gives me hope for what people can accomplish when they're given second chances and clear expectations. What kind of hope? Hope that maybe we can use your resources and our combined passion for education to help more families learn financial literacy, find stable housing, and build stronger communities. I squeezed her hand. I think that sounds like the beginning of an even better story. Looking back now, I realized that the greatest gift that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner gave me wasn't the opportunity for revenge. It was the chance to discover what happens when you respond to cruelty with accountability, to disrespect with dignity, and to family dysfunction with the possibility of redemption. Sometimes the people who hurt us most can become the greatest examples of human potential for change, if we're willing to create space for growth rather than simply demand punishment. My family learned that respect isn't earned through money or status, but through character and integrity. And I learned that true wealth isn't about what you can buy, but about what you can build in the lives of others. That's a lesson worth more than all the real estate in the world. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where family members or loved ones underestimated you based on appearances or assumptions? How did you handle it? And what did you learn about yourself in the process? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and reminded you of the importance of treating everyone with dignity regardless of their circumstances, please hit that like button to help others find this message. And if you believe in second chances and the power of accountability to create positive change, consider subscribing to hear more stories about transformation and redemption. Finally, if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about how real wealth is measured by character rather than bank account balance, please share this story with them. Sometimes we all need reminders that our true value as human beings comes from how we treat others, especially when we think no one is watching. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember that every interaction you have is an opportunity to show someone that they matter, regardless of what their circumstances might suggest. That kindness can change lives in ways you may never know.